Good evening and welcome to Unit 2 or Week 2 of 2301, which is Principles of Fire and Emergency Services. Y'all actually started the day after I left and went out of the country. So hopefully you got through Week 1. This is Week 2. I'll be back next week, right at the end of this week, actually. But hopefully, everything and everybody has gotten off to a good start. I know that you have a guest instructor or a substitute teacher. Hopefully, they're able to help you if anybody's been able to reach out. I plan on being back in the country late June 10th, so hopefully, June 11th, I'll be back and ready to answer any questions that you might have. So, a little bit. My name is Kyle. I'm the professor for the next 8 weeks for you, or actually, I guess the next 7 weeks because we're in Unit 2. You've probably read my bio in the beginning, and you know that I've had a career in public safety. I started out in law enforcement, and I tell everybody I saw the light and became a firefighter. And toward the end of my career up in the metropolitan Atlanta area, which I did 30 years with DeKalb County Police and Fire, I did some dual transition roles of law enforcement and fire when I ran the arson unit up there. And then when I left, I was the chief of staff and transitioned down here to Southwest Florida. That's where I'm at now, and just below Tampa Bay area, right around Manatee County, Sarasota area. And I was hired down here as a deputy chief and spent the last 3 years as the appointed fire chief, and just actually retired. And when I retired, I took on a full-time position here with Columbia Southern. So I enjoy teaching, and hopefully you can see some of the passion of that. Not only conveyed into the lessons, but hopefully some of the feedback that I'll be able to give to you throughout the rest of your coursework here. So I appreciate everybody showing up. Remember, this is live lecture week. Again, apologize, I'm out of the country, so now you're watching a recording. However, I try to be respectful of your time because I know that just about everybody here should be working adults and probably in the career field of something with public safety or occupational safety and health, something like that. So I want to be respectful of your time, and I try to usually keep these lectures to about 45 minutes and no more than that. So what are we covering? Well, as you can see, we've had units 1 through 8. Today we are going to be covering over units 1 through 4, the first half, and then when we come back on week 6, we will pick up on the last, which is units 5, 6, 7, and 8. I know we just got finished with 1, but I like to do a recap just to make sure everybody is on the same page. I'll give you a couple of course expectations. You might see, especially for like journal entries and things like that, a 200-word minimum. I can tell you that for me personally, unless your current teacher for the next couple of weeks says something different, make sure you adhere to whatever they might say. But if not, I'm not really counting words. I don't look if you've got a paper or a journal reflection entry that's 150 words, but yet you are able to articulate a persuasive argument or something informational that makes sense, kind of like the language teacher or English teachers that say more with less. I'm not counting off for that. But I'm also not looking to give out extra credit because you wrote 500 words and have 3 pages when it only required something a lot less. Make sure that you are writing an APA because that is the standard in which we are writing to. And additionally, make sure that you're using credible site references, because we also want to make sure that we're including our site references. And I can give you a kind of a hint that more than likely anything that you turn in, you can at least use one site reference, which is your textbook, and that will be at least credible. And then I would encourage you to go out to the library as well and try to find some scholarly articles. And when we talk about scholarly, we are looking at something that is academically peer reviewed. If you need to reach out, make sure that you send out an email. We'll answer it as soon as we can. And make sure that you write your student name along with the class number as well, because believe it or not, I actually teach more than one class, and like I have 3 right now, and sometimes I actually teach the same class at the same time and I have about 97 students on the roll, and so I want to make sure I'm addressing you with the right class. Having said that, let's start talking about Unit 1. Unit 1 is fire service history. So let me go ahead and just kind of set the tone for this class because, again, I've been out of town, but if you are like my typical class, then that means I have a pretty diverse dynamic class. In other words, not only do I probably have the majority of you are in the firefighting career at some point in your life, you're either entering it or you might have been in it for the last 10, 15, or 20 years, or maybe even longer. I actually had a fire chief in this 2301 class. I think it was last semester that had 30 years, but was going back to school to get a bachelor's degree. So you got to remember some of these coursework, especially at the 200 level, is more for an entry level overview of what is the career field and what should we expect out of it. So some of this information might be a little elementary for you. And then again, not everybody's a firefighter. I've had law enforcement officers, people from occupational safety and health, like I said, as well. And so they don't have the firefighting background. And so these are the things that are introductory to them as well. So if you just adhere to the reading, look at the benchmarks of what's required for the coursework. Again, there's 2 journal entries and 2 assignments. So those are 4 areas there. And then weeks 1 and 5 actually have the discussion topics. If you adhere to those bullet points, look at the grading matrices of that, you'll do fine. But Unit 1, we're talking about fire service history. So in other words, to try to understand where we are and where we're moving to in the future, sometimes we can reflect back and understand where did we come from. And if we look at first organized firefighting, this really began around Rome in 6 AD. So we've been around a long time trying to figure out how to mitigate fire and either put it out or actually stop it from even happening. Now, fast forward a little bit, and the United States is starting to become a country. And we can thank Benjamin Franklin, who created the Union Fire Company in 1736. Obviously, this is before America was actually recognized as a country. This was the first volunteer department in America. And when we talk about volunteer departments, and now we're looking right there, that's almost 300 years now because it's 2026. Still today, the majority of firefighting in the United States is made up of volunteers. We think about the larger career fire departments, but the majority of firefighting and firefighters out there are volunteers because we still have vested interest in our communities and helping each other and helping our neighbors out. Now, having said that, because we come from a long history when it comes to firefighting, that means that we are steeped in tradition. And so in our first week 1 discussion, we kind of really talked about some of those pros and cons about tradition. You know, is it good to keep tradition? Is it bad to actually keep tradition? And from most discussion topics that I've seen in the past, I think there's a healthy balance between both of those. Obviously, tradition is really kind of what defines us, what makes the career so great. But at some time, especially with the way laws progress, there are certain things that are frowned upon today, which maybe not even just frowned upon, but could actually be crossing the line of both civil and criminal liability, depending on what you do and what someone might have done 40 or 50 years ago in the fire department that was traditional, that has kind of gone to the wayside. I can tell you real quick a little bit about a tradition. You know, I came from a large metropolitan area that the department was kind of divided right down the middle. There was a north end of the county, there was a south end of the county, and for some reason, even though we were one department, one uniform, one patch, we operated really still like 2 separate departments. There was a north side and there was a south side, and depending on where you worked, you kind of fell in line with the traditions of how things were done. And even though there was plenty of traditions, I would like to think of one here, since we're talking about pros and cons of tradition, one that was really kind of a con. If you worked on the south side, because there was a lot more fire down there, in other words, that gave us the excuse that we had to get there quicker. And by getting there quicker, that means faster turnout time, faster driving, and we didn't want to be kind of restrained in order to do other things like getting dressed while we were in motion. So therefore, the tradition down there was you do not wear seatbelts because they just hindered everything. And it kind of made you look less of a top Jake type firefighter. And then of course everybody up on the north end was like, well, no, this is the rules, this is the policy. And what's kind of interesting, even though people knew that it was happening, people turn a blind eye to it. And this is actually, if you take some of the leadership or management courses, this is called deliberate indifference, and that's part of supervisory negligence. So you really don't want to go down that path, especially once you start riding up in the right seat and you know everybody on your truck or your engine is violating policy, especially, God forbid, an accident was to occur. So there is times for tradition, but there's also times where some traditions just need to go to the wayside. In Unit 2, right, this is where we're moving up to now, which is this week. We talk about what are career opportunities in emergency services. And for Unit 2, the live lecture, if you are attending tonight and listening to me through my recording, then you have met the requirements for this week. This is the true assignment for this week. And if you are watching the recording at a later date during the week, then make sure that you list your 3 takeaways so that way you can get credit as well. But you'll be reading chapters 2, 3, and 12. So a lot of reading this week, and we're starting to really kind of interest, like, what is the fire department? What does the career look like? Because this is actually what's going to set us up for the assignment in week 3. And so when we look at fire departments across the country, a lot of them have different rules and regulations, requirements, or I should say minimum requirements to go in. But if we look at it holistically, more of an average, everywhere that we look, most all fire departments still today are requiring at least someone be 18 years of age and have at least a GED. Now, once you get into the fire department, some of those parameters might change, especially if you want to promote. You might need something different, i.e. like an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, or eventually now, especially if you want to be a fire chief, a minimum of a bachelor's degree is usually required, and a lot of them are preferring masters. And so depending on your career level right now, if you are truly 19 or 20 years old and you're starting and you're thinking, okay, in 20 years do I want to be a fire chief, will a master's be enough? Will you need a doctorate as well in order to take on that position? This has been a traditional blue collar work for the most part, and it's still a good hands-on in the field dirty position. But as you move up into the administrative ranks, and just like everything else today, we are extremely data driven. So you need these skill sets of being able to handle not only a lot of writing, but to be able to write well, understand data analytics, statistics, and things like that in order to be able to argue for your line item budgets, for more equipment, for personnel, for better benefits, and things like that. We are in a data-driven world. And of course, don't even get me going down the road and the rabbit holes of AI, but obviously AI is going to be, a help in order for people to be able to write to some of that as well. But where I'm going with this is these are why we're going to secondary education. This is why we're getting our degrees now, so that way it puts us in a better position in order to be able to understand these things and perform at that level as well. Again, a lot of your fire departments, depending, I worked for, like I said, a large career metropolitan department that we actually were recognized by the state in order to be able to hire someone straight off the street with no training whatsoever. And we would take them all the way from ground zero through their Firefighter 1 and 2 certifications, and we'd adhere to the National Professional Qualifications as well, NPQ certs. Not every department is like that, and so a lot of your areas, especially here where I work down in Southwest Florida, the tech schools handle the certifications for firefighter, EMT, and paramedic. And so a lot of people, the majority of everybody, here in the state will go through that. They spend their own resources, their own time in order to be able to get the certification of firefighter and EMT, because now most all departments are also wanting that in hand as well, a minimum of EMT. But obviously, if you've been around the block long enough, now the preferred is firefighter and paramedic. And, once you have those certs in your hand, that's when a lot of people will start to apply now. And separate from the fire department, there are just EMS positions as well. And you might have a combined fire department where you're a transport agency as well. And so you might actually be called like fire rescue. And there are different positions within the emergency medical field as well. Most basic is usually called EMR or emergency medical responder, first responder, things like that. Then you go through your levels of EMT, and most organizations now, most things are being recognized as an EMT with a letter designation. So you start off as an EMTB or basic, and you can transition to an I, which is intermediate, to an EMT-A, advanced, and obviously each one of those comes with a little bit more skill set, a little bit more learning, and then you can move up to, which is the last level, which is EMT-P or EMT paramedic. And a lot of times, depending on where you work, you might just drop the EMT off of the front of that and just differentiate between, we have EMTs and we have paramedics. Either way, they're kind of worked in together as well. And additionally, in the fire service now is the needs of the community. They're changing, and the needs of the community are changing the role of how we actually offer our services. Where we used to be just really a fire-based system, but now we're really a fire-based EMS system. And you can think, from building codes to code enforcement to prevention, through public education, building materials, there's just not a lot of fire anymore. And if you were to look at the data in your departments, I would probably argue, and this is kind of a broad number, but your EMS runs probably take up 65 to maybe 75% of your call volume. Now, there are going to be some outliers depending on, how rural you are or how many stations you have, and what type of area, what is the true community reflection in your area. You could be as high as 85% EMS related, but for the majority of us in the fire service space, when I left my last department, we were running around 72%. And so these are really, really important numbers, especially from the perspective of a fire chief, especially depending on how my department is codified by a charter. In other words, what gives us the authority to actually operate as a government, and how I can actually not only take in income through taxation and special purpose taxes and non-ad valorem taxing and all that, but there's a certain way based off of the language within the constitutions of the state and your charters on how you actually can spend the money that you take. And so if you are a combination fire rescue department, then there might be percentages of which you can allot to the medical side, and you need to know what are the percentages of your call volume in order to make sure that you can articulate that. And so this is where I'm kind of getting at, where we are moving into a very data driven fire service now. And then, like I said, so we've moved from fire-based to a fire-based EMS system, which means our skill levels are increasing. And this is why we're continuously trying to educate our people, not only from an academic perspective, but from a practitioner level as well, giving you the skill sets to make you better in the field so that you're a better practitioner, so that you're giving a better level of service to the customer in which we serve, which is our community. Now, what are some of our normal responses? See, if you go back 20 years, 30, 40, 50 years, our fathers and our grandfathers' departments, we just operate different now. Everything from natural disasters, not to say that they didn't do it, but you can see that a lot of natural disasters, especially if you were to look at the media, that a lot of them are occurring more frequently. I live in an area that, from June through November, and the height of it is actually from the beginning of September through mid-October, there's about a 6-week time frame where we're really inundated with the hurricane season. There's other areas that have tornadoes and things like that. Now, these have always been occurring, but as we bring in more and more people into areas and people start to migrate out of the rural areas into more and more of the cities, then we have more and more issues, obviously, with natural disaster. We're also dealing with active shooters, which we didn't really deal with, 20, 30, 40 years ago like we do today, mass casualty incidents. And then if we just go back, which I can't even believe that it's been 6 years, but pandemics, that really stopped the world from rotating and how we actually handled business. And that was a really, really big dynamic where most everybody was isolated, quarantined, could not be around anybody, but yet we still had to operate. We couldn't operate remotely out of our house and run emergency calls. So no, we still had to bring people into the stations. We still had to respond to the people that were sick. And so our responses that we used to not do are now starting to become more and more normal for us. So that is all of week 2. That will bring us into next week, which is week 3 or unit 3, which is training and higher education, which is really kind of what we're grasping in this by y'all getting your degree and sitting through these classes. So what is truly training and higher education for emergency services? There is an assignment which is asking you to do a professional development plan. Now, here's the good news for that. There is a template. You can choose. I've seen many people submit this in different ways. I accept it in whatever way is more comfortable for you to write, as long as it really makes sense to me and you're actually getting something out of it. But there is a template. You can go right through the template and write. Look at what the statement or the question is asking you, and then write to those benchmarks on how you are achieving that. You can take those benchmarks and write it out into your own page, which is more like of a narrative format. But what it's really trying to do is get you focused so that you're just not kind of saying, oh, hey, if it's free for me, let me go get that class, let me go get that cert, but really say, okay, where do I want to see myself 5 years from now? Maybe you want to build out a plan because you're an entry-level firefighter and you say, okay, what do I need to do in order to get to become a member on my specialty team? What do I need to do to get to the right seat, and be a lieutenant or a captain? Maybe you're a captain now and you're saying, well, okay, what do I need to do to become a battalion chief, an assistant chief, a district division chief, assistant chief, deputy chief, whatever it is that you called within your organization? Or maybe the aspiration is, say, you know what? The sky is the limit. I actually want to be a fire chief. Well, by doing the career development plan and using the template, it kind of starts to outline all these things. So that way you're not kind of spinning your wheels, wasting your time. You actually have something to focus on. And depending on who is in the class, like I said, and I've had this before, I've had someone say, hey, look, I'm in law enforcement and I'm not a firefighter and I can't really write to these benchmarks. And I'll just say, well, look at, how is your structure is. Do you want to be a detective one day? And if you want to be a detective, depending on your organization, which avenue do you want to go? Do you want to go into, general theft, burglary, major felony, ICAC, because you're kind of interested in internet crimes and, and you want to be protective of children as well? Do you want to just really stay on the road and actually become, a lieutenant and then a captain because you want to run a precinct or a watch or something like that? Just start writing it the way you are. Someone was in occupational safety and health, and so they started really looking at the certifications they needed in order to progress up their career ladder. I don't know every profession out there, but I do know that when I read stuff, are you really writing it to the benchmarks in order to help you? And that's really what this is. It's not to benefit me, it's to benefit you and your career growth, put you on a good path, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. Additionally, next week, you'll be reading chapter 4. And so, again, the focus is what? Training and higher education. So a lot of people tend to think, well, in the fire department, again, like I said earlier, most mentality is it's a fairly blue collar skills related job. So if I can go through the academy and I learn how to become a firefighter 1 and a firefighter 2, I get those skills, I get that knowledge, then I know how to put out fire, I know how to do. Additionally, you might say, well, okay, every once in a while I get some in-service training that kind of keeps up a little bit with my continuing education, or I'll take a technical class or all that. And these are truly, really most of the minimum requirements that you really need to do, especially if you got the medical side, because every year you're going to have to do some type of recertification to get CEUs in order to maintain that EMT or that paramedic with the skills, whether or not you're providing ACLS and things like that and PALS. But you know, what can you do to actually further your career, make you more of an asset, not only just for you, but the people that you work for, the people that, in one of the things at my last department, we used to always talk is about how do you lead up? In other words, you do have bosses. Everybody has bosses. I was a fire chief. I had 5 bosses. They were called commissioners. Those commissioners had a few 100,000 bosses, which was called the people. And then the people became the bosses again of us as firefighters, not only as firefighters, but we also had lieutenants and captains above us. Everybody's got bosses. So how are you bringing relief to the people above you to make their job easier too, so that they in turn can then pour back into you, coaching, mentoring, things like that, right? And so what I'm trying to encourage here is you've probably worked around someone who came into the fire service, knocked out everything they needed to do, was probably a pretty good firefighter. And then all of a sudden at like year 1 or year 2, they said, you know what? I'm good. I'm good. And now fast forward, they've been here for 20 years. And so it's like for the last 18 years, it's like, what have you done? What have you done with yourself? What have you done to better this career field? What have you been done to better this department, this engine crew and things like that. And this tends to be sometimes the people that people don't want to work around because they know there's not really good benefit, especially some of the younger ones, right? A lot of times these people can also become jaded. So what I'm trying to say is I'm encouraging you, constantly take the classes. But if you're using this career development plan that is part of the assignment, then it kind of really puts you on the right path in order to hopefully tap into the passion that you might have as well. This is one of the things I used to tell people too. I mean, I've done 30 plus years, well, when I finally just retired again, I had 37 years in public safety. And I said, I have 37 years in public safety, but sometimes every 2 years, maybe on the most 4 years, it seemed like I was changing. I went from being a firefighter to working on specialty teams. I worked on a high angle rescue. I worked on a crash fire rescue. I got dive rescue certified. I became an instructor. Then I became an arson investigator. Where else can you go and spend one career but feel like you've worked at 8 or 9 or 10 different jobs? And it's just a wonderful career to be able to do that. Now, having said that, beyond the in-service and the technical classes, and again, I congratulate y'all because everyone that's in this class right now is already stepping up through the formal education window. And some of you might actually just be working on your associates now, or you're trying to finish up your bachelor's. Now, will you go on after that, get a master's, and you will have to decide if that's beneficial for you in your career development. But today, especially for officers, especially if you're going to get really kind of at the level of battalion chief and higher, but depending on your department, they might want it as an entry level officer, you're going to start needing some more formal education. And I will argue that formal education doesn't necessarily make anybody smarter, because there's a lot of people that don't have any education and are super, super smart people, right? But I will tell you that it does make you a better administrator. I can tell the people that I work around that are in officer positions that actually have the skill set that has been required of them through formal education. They write better, they're able to articulate or make persuasive arguments better. A lot of times, if you can stay the course and go through these classes and actually graduate with your degree, that also shows a certain level of work ethic, that you're committed, that you can see projects through. So these are the things that really make great administrators. Depending on some of the other classes that you might take as well, depending on the degree that you're getting, a lot of times you'll start to understand human behavior better. Especially, I would encourage you to take psychology classes, because I can tell you, especially as you move up that ladder, if you move from firefighter and you become a station officer, and if you move out of the station to start running like a battalion or a shift, or you become a fire chief, You will fight less and less fire, but every day you come to work, you will deal with people. And if you can understand how to deal with people, how to tap into EQ, how to have empathic listening skills, and things like that, it will make you an incredible leader by just being able to do that. Uh, Additionally, depending on the classes you're taking, you'll be able to further your tactics and strategy better, have better understanding. Things change. When I first entered the fire service, our tactics and strategy were different than what they are today. And why are they different today? Because we've learned. We've learned through mistakes. We've learned through better science. We've learned through better understanding how to change in order to progress our career into a better trajectory. And obviously, you will need it for advancement and promotion. Continuing education, why do we do that? I just mentioned, especially if you got EMT or paramedic, you'll be taking CEUs obviously all the time as well. But obviously, you want to make sure that you're keeping up with your standards, changes into the industry, changes of how we do things, and it's just really for updates in your profession. You also have new laws, new regulations. One minute you thought, okay, well, I can do this, but all of a sudden now a regulation, an ordinance, something has changed within our career field, and we need to make sure that we understand it so that we're not violating something else as well. And when I talk about the template, and when you read the template and the material that goes along with all that, you'll be following what's called the National Professional Development Model. And so it's real easy to follow. And I believe everybody will do a good job on that. So I look forward to seeing those. That will bring us up to Unit 4, which is the last week that I'm going to talk about in the first half of this, I guess, week 2 lecture. And like I said, when we come back on week 6, which I'll definitely be back in town for that, we'll be talking Units 5 through 8. But in Unit 4, which is called Fire Department Resources, and again, we're talking a little bit about some general knowledge, which a lot of you might find to be a little elementary in nature. But there is a journal entry, and the journal entry is having you do a reflection about sleeping quarters. And so I kind of just leave it at that. So that way I don't want to add any kind of mystery to it, but it's just really having you articulate some type of an argument on, do you kind of embrace the traditional sleeping quarters where it's one big room where you have multiple bunks in there, or the way most stations are being built now, where there are individual sleeping quarters that you probably share with the other 2 shifts, but you're able to really kind of go in, close the door, and just chill out by yourself. So some of the pros and cons of that. You'll be reading chapter 5. And they're going to talk a little bit about fire department buildings and what are we really, we're talking about the actual building that you go to and you go to work, and what is the purpose of these buildings. And obviously it's to house our apparatus, our equipment, the people that are in there. You get some briefing on, beyond those buildings, then there are training facilities as well, and what's usually found at training facilities, such as our props and towers, and all the things that we can put into practical applications so that we can hone in our skills and perform better at the practitioner level. What are in these buildings, what are housed at these training facilities? They talk about different types of apparatus. We obviously have engines. We also have trucks, which are our aerials, and then we have specialty apparatus as well, which there's everything from brush trucks to QRV, quick response vehicles, to tanker trucks, to hazmat trailers, to decon trucks. I worked on one for probably maybe a third of my career at a general aviation airport on a crash fire rescue, which was called a crash truck for the ARF team. And then obviously, in order for us to be able to do our job, the book kind of goes into different ensembles for our PPE, or protective clothing, as well on that. That will bring us up then to Unit 5, which is our fire dynamics. So I like to keep these lectures somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes. I'm right at the 35-minute mark. So I'd like to just say one thing that is precious and a precious commodity is time. So I thank you for your time tonight. For those who showed up, I thank you for the time that you will take. For those who didn't and will actually watch the recording, again, reach out to the guest instructor that is taking over for me for the 2 weeks that I'm out of the country. I will be back, like I said, late on June 10th, so I should be popping back into the class room setting around June 11th. And other than that, I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything you're doing. I look forward to the rest of the class with y'all. Y'all have a good night.